art journal here, and I've got it just turned to a blank page. I am going to use some gesso to get the surface ready. When I'm using stencils and different things, I like how it feels. If I'm using paint with a stencil, I should say. I really like how it feels on a gessoed page. Also gives me some time. Oh, look, a hair. Gives me some time if I make a mistake, because I can put a little water on it, fix things, move it around. And since I make plenty of mistakes, which I just call oops, I like to have that option to change it and move it around. So I'll just put a layer of gesso on here, not a heavy layer so it'll dry quickly. And there we go. I'm going to use Jessica Sporn's Random Square stencil. And this was one of the very first stencil I bought of hers. Absolutely love it. The pattern in it just spoke to me, drew me right to it. And as you can tell by all the paint and stuff that's on it, how much I've used it. This little hook, just so you know, is something that I added onto it for how I store my stencils on a rack. It won't come with that. It's just the square that you get when you order it. So I'm going to put some paint on here. And I am not painting this on very carefully. I don't care if some paint smushes underneath it. I actually kind of like that. I'm just going for a very, very random. I did not use the entire stencil this time. And what I get is a pattern like that. I like that. I like that look quite a bit. And then I'm going to pick another color. Oh, it's a new can of paint. Can, tub, squirty bottle, whatever we call these things. Apparently words have left me today, so we'll see how I do stumbling over words. Apparently this is sealed like Fort Knox. Oh, I guess I should be happy since it doesn't spill in transit. Ooh, it's got a nice little skin on it too. I only pulled part of it off. Hey, that's pretty cool. Alright, now it's ready to go. Because I'm going to be flipping back and forth between these two colors, I am going to grab another paintbrush. And look, I didn't clean it off. I don't care. I'm going to kind of turn the stencil and just dab on some paint. My blues and greens will mix together a little bit. I did purposely pick colors that if they mix together, it would be pretty. And that definitely is. So I'm just going to go and fill in the rest of this with my sloppy stencil style. Still have a little bit of paint here, so do I want to go around the edges a little bit? I'm just putting a little bit of water on my finger to help make the paint spread really easily for me. The edges where I hadn't gessoed as carefully will pick up the paint a little differently. And I kind of like that. How much water I use versus how much paint will determine how bright the colors are here. And I can always make it darker, but it's hard to take some of it away. There, and that gives it a little bit of a frame. I am going to use this stencil that I've got. And I'm going to fill it in with white to really make it stand out. This is a stencil where I enlarged a, what do you call it? Paper doll. I like the stance of that doll, so I just enlarged it and printed out on cardstock and cut it out. That way I can use it over and over again. This time I am going to paint a little more carefully. I'm going to hold down the stencil so that the paint doesn't go under it. I am using a heavy-bodied white so that it doesn't run under it too much. If it does run under it, it's not going to be the end of the world. I'm not going to worry too much about it, but if I can prevent it, I will. I should say if I can prevent it easily. Let's see. This is the first application of the white. If I feel like it's not covering up enough, like right there, I'm going to go back over any parts where I feel like it's just not doing what it needs to enough and add more to it. This can end up being a very heavy coat of white. And I like that because it'll give her some texture. Gives her a little something more to it. Alright, I think that's pretty dark. I should say pretty heavy. It's actually quite light. I did get a little bit of paint from the back of the stencil right here. I am not going to let that worry me. I've got an Inktense pencil. Now I'm going to sharpen it up because I want a nice fine point for this next part of it. And she doesn't stand out enough on the page. So I'm going to go around her with the Inktense and outline her. Because I really want her to pop. The heavy-bodied paint that I put on there is very slick, which actually makes it nice for what I'm going to do with her. Let's see, where does her head? There's her neck. And there comes around the head. If I make a mistake on this glossy paint with the Inktense pencil, it's not going to be a problem. I think I'm going to... How does that hand go? Something like that. Alright. So now I'm going to kind of give her a little bit more over here. So I've got her outlined. Now I'm going to take a small brush, and I want to do a small brush so I can control what's going on with it. Inktense pencils react with water, so I can come along, and I'm going to pull that color out to become some shading for her. If I get it, I was kind of sloppy there with how I did it. If some of it goes on the gesso part, this is one of the reasons why I like gessoing it, is it'll come off of that with water also. And so all of a sudden she's going from being this all white type of person to having this pink color to her. Not a lot of pink, just a little bit of pink. So it's giving her some definition, some shading, adding some interest to her. I can pull some of it into the middle. Hand. I really like using the water-soluble type pencils for something like this because if you sketch and you're not happy with it, you can just add water and erase whatever you need to. I want her to be darker, so I'm going to add some more color. Boy, that's just not going on there very much, is it? As I scribble that on there, then I have a little more color to work with to pull out. Like that. Yeah, she's still awfully light to me. I want some more. Oh, I was pulling up paint when I was scratching on there. Wow, maybe I should actually let things dry in between. There's a thought. Nope, not going to do that. I have too much impatience. Too much impatience to actually let things dry. Yep, I'm pulling paint up there. Guess I could get out the heat gun and dry it that way. Wow, am I even too impatient for a heat gun? What does that say? So I'm going to use some silk acrylic glaze. I like it because it's very translucent, but it'll give her a little shimmer and shine. I want to give her that. I shook it up for a moment, and then I'm actually going to mix it. I use these giant toothpicky things. The sparkle, which is just wonderfully shimmery, to mix it all up and make sure it's in there. Stir up my little pot. And now I'm going to use that same little paintbrush. How do I want the shading on her to go? I want to really highlight a part of it, so I'm going to go with this part of her head. And then just kind of brush it out. Brush it out. Pull out the color with my finger and a little bit of water on it. Alright, so I've got everything cleaned up and put away, and what I've got here is a piece of sticky back canvas that I was using for something else, and I'm going to cut off a piece of it to make a banner that will go in her hands. It is not cut precisely or perfectly, and I'm a-okay with that. The word I want to put on her is vulnerable, so what I'm going to do is write it out on paper just right next to it, about the size of what I think it should be. I'm not a big fan of my handwriting, so partially because I'm not a master of it. This gives me an idea of sizing, and I can kind of see how it would fit on there. I kind of like that size. So now I'm going to take a permanent marker, using a Sharpie here, and I am just going to start it. I'm going to add a bunch of color and stuff to this, so at this point it doesn't have to be perfect. But I sure hope I spelled this correctly. And this end looks just a hair longer than that end, so I can just trim a little bit off. And so now that's how I can get a word centered on there and make sure the size fits for me. Next thing I'm going to do is add some color to it. And I'm going to use more of a wash. Since this is fabric, I can really water some things down because it's going to absorb. It's going to absorb it quite a bit. I'm going to go with some green in the middle. If I cover up my letters too much, that's not a problem, because I can go over them in the end. This just gives me an idea of what I'm working with. So do the green there. And then around the green, I think I'm going to go with our blue. So squirt some water there. The reason I use an art journal as my background here, not as my background, as my backing, is all these little bits of color, the writing of the word on there, that just becomes the background of a future art journal page. That way I'm not wasting anything, I'm not losing anything. And for all I know, this is going to inspire me on something else later on. One more blue. And I like how it looks when the two wet paints come together. Kind of bleed a little bit there. So it's drier now. And right now it just looks like I put a Sharpie marker on that, and I don't like that at all. So what I want to do is make it look a little sketchier. So I'm just going to take a pencil, and that's not going to do anything. Okay, not a pencil. Guess I'll go with a Stabilo pencil then. And all I'm doing is trying to give it more of a sketchy look, a less perfect look. Stabilo pencils do react to water, so now that I've used Stabilo on here, the black will really run if I put something wet on top of it. And I don't know if I really want it to run that much. But I want a little more something on there. So I'm going to use, this is a Uniball micro pen. It is supposedly waterproof. And I just need, I don't know, I just want it to look a little sketchier. Just a fine line kind of thing. Guess I'm feeling sketchy. So the black is already smearing because my hand was damp. And I've been smearing the Stabilo. And you know what? I actually like that. I'm just going to let that stay in there. Actually might even add a little bit more of the smear over there. Okay. So I'm going to now I'm going to switch this out and go back to my regular, or my original page. And she should be nice and dry now. And that's going to go up there. But right like that, it's kind of So what I'm going to do is fray the edges by yanking out some threads. And in the process, it starts to pull up the paper, so it makes it easier to pull off the backing too. Let's see. The little ends are much easier to do this with. Pull this apart. And I love that this is so imperfect because it just shows her vulnerability in her imperfections. I was reading something about vulnerability somewhere, and it really struck me as how powerful our vulnerability is. How much strength we can get from that. Alright, so it's giving that part a nice edge. So I just got to get this end of it. Maybe I'll come at it from this end. See if I can get some going there. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to peel off the sticky back. This is sticky back, but it's not, like if I put it down, I can pick it up. As long as I don't press it down too hard, I can wiggle it around and play with it to get it so it has a look that I like. And I kind of want to do an arch with this. Obviously not quite like that. I'm also not a big fan of the hands of that stencil. So by putting this up here, I also cover up the hands, which weren't my favorite. Okay, so I got that much. Let's see if I get her. And this just comes down to just fiddling with it until you're happy with it. And when you're happy with it, you squash it down so that it sticks and stays.